Nin 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 po! The fourth wall-breaking Neptune is back, dragging along some new friends with her as they fight in yet another war in the fictional world of game industry. But this time, she's a shinobi, or rather a kunoichi, one of the four representing the Kampa style in a bid against the Hanipa style ninjas on which school is better. What's up, girls and boys? What's up, internet? I am Bianca, and these are my honest thoughts and impressions on Idea Factory's crossover action adventure role-playing game Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars, out now in the North American region and will be coming out in the European region on the 29th for the PlayStation consoles. Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars is, as I have said, a crossover between the world of Neptunia and SENRAN KAGURA, with the main plot revolving mostly on the Neptunia side, but with the mechanics and overall gameplay a semblance of SENRAN KAGURA. There's still a war brewing, but this time, it's not on which of the four nations is better in their spoof of the console wars, but rather has devolved into something less of a big deal, though I say that loosely compared to how high stakes everything was in the original games, or as high stakes as they could possibly be in this game's universe. And more of a who gets to proclaim themselves as the best ninja school with the best ninja style and get control over the land with two nations competing. The shinobi of the Kampa style from Heartland boast mastering the command technique, while those of the opposing Hanipa style from Marveland boast of doing the same with their action technique. For the Kampa style or Neptunia side of the crossover, we get of course Neptune alongside Blanc and my personal favorites, Noah and Vert. While on the Hanipa or SENRAN KAGURA side, we get the lead Asuka with Homura, Yumi, and Miyabi. Each of them have their own ninjutsu techniques, weapons, and overall fighting styles. Some are flashy but take a while to actually pull off the attacks, giving them openings that the enemy can utilize. Others are more effective in boss battles and single one-on-one combat, or when dealing with mobs and groups of enemies, while the rest are just generally good overall. I personally cannot go into detail on which of these characters are the best to use, since I honestly used most of them once just to get a feel for them and see if they match my playstyle, and I just stuck with my two favorite gals, Blackheart aka Noir and Greenheart aka Vert. And yes, the Neptunia goddesses retain their transformations here, although they look a whole lot different and quite honestly better than in their main titles. And yes, they are still called goddesses here, though it's more in terms of being labeled as the strongest shinobi of Kampa style. Apart from the four, some of the other characters from the franchise also make their appearance, although in varying degrees of importance. For instance, Histoire, or Histi as Neptune affectionately calls her, is the daimyo or the leader of the Kampa style. IF is here as well, and she's been relegated from a playable character to just an NPC, acting as the shrine maiden for Kumotsu Shrine, more on this later, while Kampa, getting the same kind of treatment, is basically considered, and these are the actual words of the game itself, the face of Kampa style, and is a practitioner of medical ninjutsu. Other characters like the sisters or the goddess candidates make an appearance in this title as well, though they're not playable and are reduced as those chibi characters you can have short, one-sided conversations with on the Nin Chat and who would occasionally give you side quests. As for the SENRAN Kagura cast, apart from the 4 girls, we really don't see anybody else, making it seem like they were plucked out from their reality and put on this bizarre one, which really feels not far off the mark. There are also new characters specifically made for Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars, 2 of which ends up being playable, the Amnesiac Kunoichi Go and the ninja serving under Princess Aru, another new character, Yuki. Story-wise, Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars follows the same story beats as the other Neptunia games. There's a war between factions, a bigger baddie shows up, so they had to band together. The enemy they united against turns out to be not as threatening as the true enemy in the game. You know, you get the picture. The flow is generally still the same, albeit we are now in a feudal Japan-esque era scenario with ninjas rather than in some reincarnation of cyberspace with characters that are stand-ins to consoles, publishers, and developers. Apart from this formula, which, let's face it, is like a staple to the series already, there is nothing really noteworthy about the story. It is interesting to see how these characters came together and how things tie up to their resolutions or end up as complications. It is fun and entertaining, though, to see these 2 franchises collide and see how their respective characters interact. Now, I'm not going to say that I've played the vast majority of SENRAN KAGURA games to actually know what characters are like. I've actually just played the first one on the Vita and I didn't finish it, largely because my original Vita died. And when I finally got a new one, I can't, for the life of me, remember where I put my cartridge for the game, so there's that. What I'm trying to say though is, unlike how it is with the Neptunia franchise, which I've played a majority of, save for the RPG one and the Virtual Stars one, I'm not privy to the knowledge of whether Asuka acts weirdly as Neptune does, or if she's really just that impressionable. And she acts like Neptune here because she is easily influenced by her. Dialogue-wise, how people interact in this shared universe is more akin to the style and portrayal in Neptuniaverse. Jokes and puns are ever present, as does the meta comments Neptune does and her penchant for pointing out flags, putting herself up as the main protagonist, and generally derailing even the most serious and dire of conversations. There is also a couple of particular jokes that they keep coming back to, and though at some instances it works to provide the levity needed, there are also times when these running gags just fall flat and ends up overused. Still, as weird and stilted as the dialogues are in favor of the Neptunia cast, this game made me want to go back and maybe purchase the entire SENRAN KAGURA library myself, or give finding that lost cartridge another try. And if that is one of the objectives of this title, then it has done a great job. Though from what I can remember of what I've played of SENRAN KAGURA, Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars feels and plays more fluidly and feels more basic in its gameplay mechanics. Some of SENRAN KAGURA's mechanics, like that whole deal with the clothes, have also been stripped off, no pun intended, from this title. Even so, it doesn't seem like the girls from that universe lost something from it. It might not be saying much, but this game also is one of the more graphically pleasing Neptunia games I have played. From the character models to the background models, the enemies, the animations, they all look so much better than the main games. Even reverse. The art, however, which is used during cutscenes, and I mean the CG art, remains largely the same. Although, if I were to be honest, which I am doing in this video, the way they drew the more, endowed characters are just so weirdly proportioned that it's disconcerting and comical. The jiggle physics is also present, but depending on the characters, some are more pronounced and overly crazy than others. One thing I can say despite that is the fan service is toned down a bit in this title. There is a bath scene, but it's not anything to write home about, and are pretty tame, so you don't have to worry about playing this on an extremely large screen and have someone walk in on you and question your life choices. Control-wise, there are times when it feels as though there is a bit of input lag, and the controls do tend to get a little, just a little clunky. There are times when I was pressing and holding down the ninjutsu button, the L1 button, and instead of bringing up the menu for the techniques, as it normally would, my character would just end up blocking, or they would jump instead of doing the ninjutsu I've set up in my L1 and cross button combo. This, when it happens, breaks whatever flow my attacks were in and disrupts my combos. My biggest complaint in this department, however, is how slow the characters tend to defend and the lack of a double jump, which for shinobis you would think they would at least know how to do. Scenes are delivered in a virtual novel-esque fashion, minus any input from you as a character, while battles come in the form of the action RPG that is SENRAN KAGURA. The flow of chapters, which there are 8 of in total, goes from having those cutscenes, unlocking an area, visiting that area and moving around it while cutscenes are sprinkled in from time to time to progress the narrative, then fighting the boss, rinse and repeat. Of course, you have an option to do the peaches and cream meditation, more on this later, speak with the NPCs in town, obtain and do side quests, and prep for your adventure before actually heading out. You can also free roam and level up in the previous areas you've unlocked if you so desire. Battles are very fun and fast-paced, and dungeons, depending on which point of the story you visit them, also have varying lengths and passages you can use. Though all are linear with intertwining paths, and there aren't really that much variety in enemies, most of them are just recolors of the first batches of enemies you come across, there is just simply something satisfying about looping through these locations and beating the heck out of enemies, even if at times gameplay like this can be mind-numbing. The fact that the experience points required to level up are generously given makes grinding in this game easy and fast compared to how it was with other Neptunia titles. Boss battles are interesting as well in that they have their own mechanics. At lower levels, you may be required to make use of a semblance of tactics, like deciding which ninjutsu to use, timing using your ninja tools just right, stringing up combos, using skill triggers, shinobi extremes, and the Furin Kaizen drive, which is like imbuing your character with one of the 4 elements wind, water, fire, and earth in order to give them some form of boost or another, while at high enough levels you can just wail and wallop them around while dodging a majority of attacks. Or not dodging their attacks and just going all Rambo on them, which is what I actually ended up doing in my own playthrough. Of course, experience and leveling up is just half the battle in ensuring that missions would end up being a breeze, as the game also introduces the spirit gems, which are these gems that, upon equipping in the Spirit Gem board, gives that particular character whatever enhancement is imbued in the gem. This can range from increased attacks, resistances, and defense against particular attacks, getting more drops, more experience points, increased ninjutsu attacks, and increased ninja tools attack. This, as well as making sure that your equipment is as up-to-date as possible, can spell having to redo certain fights or beating them the first time around. As for usable items, I never found the need to actually purchase them until post-game, as these get refilled quite easily even while on actual missions. And even still, should the need to purchase some arise, these are pretty cheap in the store. The only ones that actually cost a lot of money to buy are the higher leveled spirit gems. Moving on to side quests. Side quests, as I've said, are given by NPCs you speak to using the Nin Chat option in Heartland's menu, as well as by merely progressing through the story. There are a variety of side quests in Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars, from those that ask you to beat up a specific monster, beat up a specific boss, eliminate all enemies in the map, to those that require you to simply pick up items, and those that tell you to interact with ceiling stones or devices while dodging overpowered, immortal enemies. These more than 50 side quests could be accepted and triggered by heading to Kumotsu Shrine, and each of them provide rewards from equipment you won't be able to buy from the shop, usable items in the dungeons, and cash. You can also redo these side quests if you want, should you need to boost up your experience and level up some more before tackling the actual story missions. You can also view the treasury in Kumotsu Shrine, which acts as the database/album for event CGs, character info, movies, game events, and background music playback. Now, remember when I said this, as well as making sure that your equipment is as up-to-date as possible, can spell having to redo certain fights or beating them the first time around. There is actually one other thing you can do to make each area or side quest as easy as possible, and that is making use of passive effects brought about by playing the sole minigame in this title, the Peaches and Cream Meditation. Now, I'm pretty sure that there is some underlying innuendo here that is completely lost on me as to why they chose to go down this particular route for a minigame, but that is not something I will try to understand, tackle, or even let my brain dissect at this moment. Rather, I'm just going to quickly explain what this minigame is about. Basically, you can choose any of the girls in the roster and train her. If you choose your lead character or her partner, then they would both get the buffs associated to the level of difficulty this minigame has. There are 3 difficulty levels: easy, mid, and hard, with the last 2 being locked out until you progress the story further. Easy buffs your health. Mid buffs both health and attack, while hard buffs both plus your defense. Not only does the buffs differ between the 3 difficulty settings, but the number of waves or stages to the minigame also offers. The idea behind the minigame is that you have to balance the girls while they meditate atop peaches that are bobbing around in the bath. How you balance them atop said fruit is by tilting the controller around, ensuring that the ball, which is basically the stand-in for your character to give you a heads up on how to balance them, stays, well, balanced. The minigame itself isn't all that hard, and there are nuances depending on the difficulty level. The most prominent of which is that the plane where you balance the ball disappears briefly in the highest difficulty, and again, the number of waves that you have to survive balance atop a swaying, jiggling peach increases as the difficulty does. Now, you can opt to play this manually or make use of tickets, which you can obtain through NPCs in the Nin chat, through completing side quests, or by buying these from the store. Using tickets will automatically complete the minigame for you and reward you with the buffs. But in exchange, you won't be able to obtain items you would otherwise if you have completed it manually. Personally, I just completed each level with each character for the experience and then made use of the tickets afterwards. Although, if you're after the trophies or completing the trophy and getting the platinum, you would have to play the Peaches and Cream minigame with all the characters once on any difficulty and then complete it one more time on hard difficulty to, get the achievements associated with it. Lastly, there is the Yomi Training, a new option that unlocks under the Kumasu Shrine selection upon clearing the game's main story and is considered the post-game content. It is perhaps the most challenging aspect of the game and requires a high-level, well-thought-out equipment and spirit gem board and patience to complete. The Yomi Training is basically this title's version of a challenge mode, as the 9 trials that come with it offers various challenges and objectives. And each of these stages has 3 levels in total. While in Yomi Training, you also need to make sure to keep your health and Furin Kazan drive uses in check, as those carry over per stages and each stage offers tougher and tougher enemies. Oh, did I mention that dying and not having the option to switch characters will result in you failing the trial and you would have to start over from the very beginning? Yep. Fun, right? Apart from getting an achievement for completing all the trials, you also get rewards in the form of high-level gems. Completing the 9th trial, which unlocks after you beat the initial 8 and is basically a single boss battle against an upgraded version of the game's final boss, will reward you with the godly weapons Izanagi and Izanami, which are the strongest weapons in the game. Overall, the quirkiness of the Neptunia cast with the SENRAN KAGURA shinobis make for an interesting mix with a story, like all Neptunia games, that does not take itself seriously. The new gameplay, new in terms of how stagnant the core Neptunia games have become, provided an immensely fun experience that moved away from how monotonous and the somewhat repetitive nature the other titles in the franchise had been, even if the heart of the story remains largely the same in this iteration, with its interesting bosses who mostly have character of their own, easy controls and gameplay mechanics, and nothing missable in the game. Neptunia SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars is an adventure that is a breath of fresh air to the Neptunia franchise, while still keeping to the theme of a war of some sort and a rivalry with another kingdom, similar to the overly used console war spoof of the main games. It is also an interesting introduction to SENRAN KAGURA's characters for those who know little or nothing at all about the series. This game actually made me feel like a Muso or Warriors game for the Neptunia franchise would be an equally fun and interesting idea. It actually feels like, even with my playtime of 26 hours, 53 minutes and 37 seconds that I had in completing everything in the game and obtaining all of its achievements, short as it might be in my standards, every moment of that was fun, which is something I cannot say for the other games of equal length that I have played. if there are constructive criticisms to be given, it would be on the franchise as a whole, which had seemed to, again, stagnated and have not made much progress in their characters and narratives. Each of the Neptunia characters, even if this is a spin-off and a crossover, brought nothing new to the table of their respective personalities, and there was no sense of character growth for them even in this game. Granted, the growth seemed to have come in the form of the other characters, most notably the ones made specifically for this game. There are also some plot beats that were left unresolved, and I have this strange inkling that even if there was a sequel, whatever thread was left would still remain unwoven in the narrative, much like how it had been in the core games. And again, what we basically got is a rehash, albeit one with a different setting and a faster pace than that of the old. Another annoyance that I found myself having is the constant transition done to show a path being blocked or unblocked. This not only hampers gameplay, but cuts the flow and immersion for a few seconds longer than it should. This transition also got old quite fast. Then there's also the unreliable nature of blocking and dodging in battles. But as I have said, I got so much entertainment and fun in this game that I couldn't really begrudge them. It's just that the Neptunia franchise is one that I find would be such a shame to lose to stagnation of its characters and world, having been a fan of it for so long. I would really like there to be growth in the characters and for their own stories to expand to more than what we know now. But anyways, these are just my own personal thoughts and impressions on Neptunia, SENRAN KAGURA Ninja Wars. For those of you who are interested, again, this title is already out for North America and will come out in the 29th for the EU, for the PlayStation 4, and by extension, the PlayStation 5. Also, before I forget, there is free cosmetic DLC, aka new costumes, available right now to download. And that's about all we have time for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, you guys know the drill. Dream on, fly on. Bye bye for now. Keep safe, everyone.
Someday we'll have our last conversation and drink our last cup of coffee. Someday we might be 80 and think about the difference.